The stars above the outer rim looked dead. Cold, silent, endless. Near the edge of human territory, an old mining moon drifted through darkness while warning sirens echoed across abandoned stations. Cargo ships had already fled days earlier. Colonists hid underground, praying the rumors were false. But they were. The Varkeshi Dominion had arrived. One by one, massive warships emerged from hyperspace like black knives tearing through reality itself. Their hulls blocked the stars. Blue engine trails burned across the void while entire fleets formed attack positions around the moon. Destroyers, carriers, planet killers, enough firepower to erase civilizations. Inside the Dominion flagship Voidfang, High Commander Zalter stood silently before a giant holographic display. His armor reflected the burning light of nearby stars while officers moved nervously around him. "No human reinforcements detected," one officer reported. Another growled with amusement. "Their defenses are pathetic." The hologram zoomed toward the only ship guarding the system. A single human cruiser. Old, scarred, outnumbered. Its gray hull carried deep battle wounds from older wars. Several weapon systems appeared damaged. One engine flickered weakly as if the vessel could barely stay operational. The humans called it the Resolute. Zalter narrowed his eyes slowly. "That ship stayed behind intentionally," he muttered. "Perhaps they seek honorable surrender," another officer laughed. The bridge erupted in cruel amusement. For 13 years, the Dominion had conquered star systems without mercy. Entire alien civilizations surrendered the moment Dominion fleets entered orbit. Resistance always ended the same way. Cities burning, planets glassed, species erased from history. Fear alone usually won battles before the first shot. But humans were different. Dangerously different. The reports about them disturbed even experienced commanders. Human soldiers fought while injured. Civilians resisted occupation with homemade explosives. Entire colonies kept fighting after losing communication with Earth. One report described humans continuing battle operations after their warship had literally split in half. Zalter hated humans already. Not because they were strong, because they refused to break. "Open transmission," he ordered. Static crackled across space. Moments later, the face of a human appeared on the central screen. An older man with gray hair sat calmly inside the human bridge. Smoke drifted through the background while sparks fell from damaged ceiling panels. Crew members rushed between stations, but the captain himself looked completely relaxed. "Captain Elias Ward." Zalter stepped closer to the screen. "You are surrounded by the Dominion fleet. Lower your shields and prepare for occupation." Silence answered him. Ward studied the alien commander carefully before speaking. "No." The bridge went quiet instantly. One Dominion officer snarled. Did the human misunderstand? Zalter's voice hardened. "You stand alone. There is no escape." Ward leaned back slightly in his chair. "That's true. Then surrender." Again, the human answered calmly. "No." The Dominion officers exploded with anger. "Arrogant primate. Destroy them immediately." Humans never learn. But Zalter raised one claw, silencing the bridge. Something felt wrong. The human captain showed no fear at all. Not bravery. Not desperation. Certainty. Like a man who already knew how this would end. Zalter zoomed the battlefield display closer toward the Resolute. Then his eyes narrowed. "Why are their reactors overheating?" A Dominion analyst looked up nervously. "Commander, power levels are rising beyond safety limits." "How much?" The analyst swallowed hard. "Past maximum containment." Another officer suddenly turned pale. "The humans are overloading their own reactor." The bridge fell silent. Zalter stared at the cruiser again. No reinforcements. No retreat. No surrender. Just one damaged human ship sitting quietly before an entire invasion fleet. Then realization struck him like ice through his spine. Move the fleet back, he whispered. But it was already too late. Inside the Resolute, red warning lights flashed across every corridor. Metal groaned beneath unbearable reactor pressure while crew members strapped themselves into stations. None of them panicked. One young officer closed his eyes and whispered a final message to his daughter back on Earth. Another crew member laughed shakily while loading ammunition into failing railgun systems. Captain Ward stood slowly from his chair. Around him, human crew members looked exhausted but proud. Ward activated the transmission one final time. "You came here expecting surrender." The human cruiser suddenly accelerated forward. "Fast. Far too fast." Dominion officers shouted in alarm as the damaged vessel shot directly toward the center of their formation. "It's charging us. Impossible speed. They're burning their engines apart." Zalter roared instantly. "Fire everything." The darkness exploded. Thousands of plasma weapons fired together, turning space into blue hellfire. The human cruiser vanished beneath endless explosions. Its shields collapsed. Armor melted away. Entire sections tore apart. But the Resolute kept coming. Closer. Closer. Captain Ward's voice echoed across every Dominion channel. Humanity learned long ago. The reactor core reached critical overload. Stars themselves seemed to shake. That monsters only stop when someone is willing to burn with them. Zalter's eyes widened in horror. Then the universe turned white. The explosion swallowed the stars. For one terrifying second, the battlefield disappeared inside pure white light. Dominion warships vanished beneath a storm of fire and radiation, while the shockwave ripped across space like an angry god tearing through reality itself. Then came the silence. No voices. No weapons. Only drifting wreckage. The mighty Dominion formation had been shattered. Destroyers floated in broken halves. Entire carriers burned from the inside out. Thousands of escape pods spun helplessly through debris fields filled with dead ships and frozen bodies. The sacrifice of one human cruiser had destroyed nearly half the invasion fleet. Inside the flagship Voidfang, emergency alarms screamed endlessly. Containment failure on Deck 7. Life support offline. Multiple hull breaches detected. Commander Zalter slammed against his command throne as the damaged flagship spun violently through space. Sparks exploded around the bridge while terrified officers struggled to regain control. One side of the bridge had been completely torn open. Several officers had been sucked into the vacuum moments earlier. Zalter slowly stood, breathing heavily. On the main screen, the battlefield looked like the aftermath of a dying star. The human ship was gone. Nothing remained of the Resolute except expanding fragments of burning metal. And yet the human captain had won. Zalter stared at the destruction with growing disbelief. "One ship," he whispered. An officer nearby trembled visibly. How could humans do this to themselves? No one answered. Because deep down, every surviving Dominion soldier understood the truth. Humans feared surrender more than death. Suddenly, another officer shouted from the sensor station. "Commander, what now?" Multiple hyperspace signatures detected. The bridge froze. Then space itself began tearing open. One after another, enormous human warships emerged from hyperspace, surrounding the ruined battlefield. Gray armored hulls appeared in complete silence, while blue engine lights glowed through the darkness like the eyes of predators. 10 ships, then 20, then 50. By the end, hundreds of human vessels filled the stars. Zalter felt cold fear crawl through his chest for the first time in decades. The humans had been waiting. One giant battleship moved forward from the center of the fleet. Its hull carried scars from countless wars, but unlike the Dominion ships, those scars were displayed proudly instead of repaired. Painted across the front in massive white letters was a single human word. Vengeance. A transmission suddenly forced itself onto every Dominion screen. A woman appeared wearing the black uniform of the Terran Fleet Command. Her face looked calm, but her eyes carried unbearable rage. Admiral Sophia Reyes. Behind her stood dozens of silent human officers. "You attacked civilian colonies in the Outer Rim," she said quietly. "No yelling. No threats. That somehow made it worse. You burned hospitals on Keller Station." Images suddenly appeared beside her. Dead civilians. Destroyed homes. Children trapped beneath collapsed buildings. Several Dominion officers looked away uneasily. Reyes continued. "You executed surrendering miners." More images appeared. Bodies lined against walls. Families crying. Entire settlements erased by orbital bombardment. Zalter clenched his fists. "War requires sacrifice," he growled. Admiral Reyes stared directly into the camera. "No," she answered coldly. "That was cruelty." The human fleet suddenly shifted formation. Weapons powered online across hundreds of ships simultaneously. Railgun batteries rotated toward the surviving Dominion vessels, while missile systems opened like mechanical jaws preparing to feed. The darkness itself seemed to vibrate. One terrified Dominion officer whispered, "Commander, we should retreat." But before Zalter could answer, another human transmission interrupted. This time it wasn't from an admiral. It came from a young human girl. She looked no older than 8. Dirt covered her face. Tears rolled down her cheeks while flames burned behind her somewhere inside a ruined colony. "Please," she whispered weakly into the camera, "why are you hurting us?" The bridge of the Voidfang went silent. Even hardened Dominion officers looked disturbed. Then the recording ended. Admiral Reyes returned to the screen. "That child died 3 minutes later." Her voice never changed. "That was before Captain Elias Ward gave his life, delaying your fleet long enough for us to arrive." Zalter suddenly understood something horrible. The humans weren't here for victory. They were here for revenge. Reyes slowly stood from her command chair. "You came to human space expecting surrender." Her fleet moved closer. "But humans have a rule. Thousands of weapons locked onto Dominion targets. When you slaughter our people," the stars lit up with charging energy, "we make sure you never do it again." Zalter's eyes widened. Then the human fleet opened fire. The first human volley tore through the darkness like divine judgment. Massive railgun rounds crossed space at impossible speed, smashing directly through Dominion destroyers before their shields could even react. One ship exploded instantly. Another spun apart in burning pieces. A third vanished beneath a chain reaction of internal detonations. The battlefield became chaos. "Return fire," Commander Zalter roared as alarms screamed across the bridge of the Voidfang. Dominion warships unleashed thousands of plasma cannons into the advancing human fleet. Blue fire lit the stars while missiles streaked between drifting wreckage. But the humans kept advancing. Cold, precise, relentless. Their ships moved like hunters surrounding wounded prey. Admiral Sophia Reyes stood motionless aboard the human battleship Vengeance, while tactical holograms flashed around her. "Target enemy carriers first," she ordered calmly. A nearby officer hesitated slightly. "Admiral, Dominion escape pods are launching from those carriers." Reyes looked at the burning battlefield for one long second. Then she answered, "Rescue survivors after weapons are neutralized." The officer blinked in surprise. "Even theirs?" "Yes." Around the bridge, several younger crew members exchanged uneasy looks. Hours earlier, the Dominion had slaughtered thousands of civilians. Entire human settlements burned because of them. And still, humanity planned to save enemy survivors. Far across the battlefield, Dominion fighters swarmed toward the human line like angry insects. Small attack craft slammed into human cruisers, detonating against shields in desperate attacks. One human frigate exploded near the front lines. Another lost engines and drifted helplessly through debris. Yet every time a human ship fell, the others only fought harder. Zalter watched in growing horror. "What are these humans?" A wounded Dominion officer whispered shakily. "They fight like predators protecting their young." The statement chilled the bridge. Because it was true. Humanity wasn't fighting for conquest, or territory, or power. They were fighting for revenge. Suddenly, warning alarms flashed across Dominion sensors. Human boarding craft detected. Before Zalter could react, armored human dropships smashed directly into the hull of a nearby Dominion cruiser. Explosive charges detonated instantly, tearing open the ship's armor. Then the humans entered. Helmet cameras from Dominion soldiers began flooding the command bridge with terrifying live footage. Gunfire echoed through narrow corridors. Human Marines moved through smoke and sparks with terrifying aggression. They fought fast, violently, almost animalistically. Even injured humans kept moving after taking plasma hits. One Dominion soldier fired directly into a Marine's chest. The human staggered backward, then kept charging. The terrified alien screamed before the camera feed cut to black. Another transmission appeared seconds later from inside a different Dominion ship. This time, the footage showed human soldiers helping wounded alien civilians escape a burning compartment. Zalter stared in confusion. They rescue enemies while killing our fleets. Nobody understood it. One officer growled nervously, "Humans make no sense." No, they made terrifying sense. Humans separated soldiers from civilians. War from cruelty. Battle from murder. And that made them far more dangerous. Because they could unleash unbelievable violence without losing themselves completely. Admiral Reyes suddenly received a transmission request. Dominion flagship requesting communication. On screen, Zalter appeared immediately, fury burning in his eyes. "You call yourselves civilized?" he snarled. "You rammed your own ship into our fleet." Reyes didn't blink. "You invaded human colonies. You could have surrendered." The human admiral stepped closer to the screen. "And let monsters decide our future." Silence filled both bridges. Then Reyes spoke again, quieter this time. Captain Ilias Ward knew he was going to die. The image of the destroyed Resolute appeared beside her. He stayed anyway. Even some human officers lowered their heads respectfully. "He bought time for innocent people to escape," Reyes continued. "That's what humans do." Zalter clenched his fists harder. "You glorify sacrifice." "No," Reyes answered coldly. "We honor courage." Suddenly, another Dominion officer shouted in panic from the background. "Commander, more human ships incoming." The battlefield scanners lit up again. A second human fleet was emerging from hyperspace. Bigger than the first one. Zalter felt fear tightening around his chest. How many ships does humanity have? But the worst moment came seconds later. One damaged Dominion carrier exploded unexpectedly nearby, sending escape pods spinning into open space. Human rescue ships immediately broke formation to save survivors. Even enemy survivors. One young Dominion officer watched the scanner in disbelief. "They're saving us." Nobody on the bridge spoke. Because for the first time, the Dominion realized the horrifying truth about humanity. Humans were not monsters. They were something much worse. People willing to become monsters only when absolutely necessary. Then the sensor officer suddenly turned pale. "Commander." Zalter looked up sharply. "What now?" The officer swallowed hard. Long-range scans just detected a Dominion supercarrier entering the system. The bridge fell silent, because everyone knew its name. The World Eater had arrived. The battlefield froze the moment the World Eater emerged from hyperspace. Even among the massive ships of the Varkeshi Dominion, the supercarrier looked unnatural. Its shadow swallowed entire fleets. Black armor stretched across nearly 40 kilometers of reinforced metal, covered in glowing weapon ports and shield arrays. It looked less like a ship, and more like a moving apocalypse. Human officers aboard the battleship Vengeance, stared silently at tactical displays as the giant vessel advanced through drifting debris. One young officer whispered nervously, "That thing destroyed the Tarani's republic." Another answered quietly, "And 7 moons." At the center of the supercarrier, an enormous circular structure slowly began glowing blue. The planet killer cannon. Commander Zalter finally allowed himself to breathe again. Now, he said coldly, they learn fear. Across the battlefield, damaged Dominion ships regrouped behind the supercarrier like wounded predators hiding behind something bigger. The balance of power had shifted instantly. Human ships that had charged fearlessly moments earlier now pulled back into defensive formation. Even Admiral Sophia Reyes remained silent as she studied the incoming threat. An officer near her spoke carefully. "Admiral, if the World Eater fires, every colony in this sector dies." Reyes looked toward the glowing cannon. "How long until full charge?" 8 minutes. 8 minutes before millions died. The bridge fell silent, except for warning alarms and distant explosions. Then a transmission request suddenly appeared from the Dominion flagship. Reyes accepted it immediately. Zalter appeared smiling for the first time since the battle began. "You humans fight well," he admitted, "but courage changes nothing." Behind him, the massive supercarrier continued charging its weapon. "You delayed us, you damaged us, but now your colonies burn." Reyes stared at him coldly. "You kill civilians because you're weak." Zalter's expression darkened instantly. "We rule because we are strong." "No," Reyes replied softly. "You rule because others fear you." The Dominion commander leaned closer to the screen. "And soon humanity will fear us too." The transmission ended. For several seconds, nobody aboard the Vengeance spoke. Then another screen activated automatically. Emergency broadcasts from nearby human colonies flooded onto the bridge. Families hiding underground. Hospitals evacuating children. Parents recording final messages for loved ones. A little boy appeared on one screen clutching a stuffed animal, while explosions shook the walls behind him. "Mom," he whispered through tears, "are the monsters coming here too?" The bridge became painfully quiet. Several hardened human officers lowered their heads. One crew member quietly wiped tears from her face. Admiral Reyes stared at the frightened child for a long moment. Then she turned toward the fleet. "Open all channels." Her voice echoed across every human ship instantly. "The Dominion believes fear makes us weak." Human pilots listened from cockpits. Marines listened from damaged corridors. Engineers listened beside burning reactors. Reyes continued calmly. "They think threatening our families will break us." The glowing weapon aboard the World Eater grew brighter. But humanity has always been strongest when protecting each other. Silence spread across the fleet. Then Reyes gave the order. "All fighter wings attack." Across hundreds of human carriers, launch bays exploded into motion. Fighters poured into space by the thousands. Young pilots, veteran aces, volunteers who already understood they might never return. Among them was Commander Lena Cross. Her fighter launched violently into open space, while warning lights flashed across her cockpit. A nearby pilot laughed nervously over comms. "So anyone got a survival plan?" Another answered immediately. "Yeah." "What?" "Wind." Several pilots laughed. Not because it was funny, because humans laughed when terrified. Lena tightened her grip on the controls as the giant supercarrier filled her view. The World Eater looked invincible. Its shields glowed like a small sun. Thousands of defense turrets rotated toward the incoming fighters. One pilot whispered softly, "We're not coming back from this." Lena answered without hesitation. "Maybe not." Her eyes hardened. "But those kids behind us will." The first Dominion defensive cannons opened fire. Space erupted into death. Human fighters exploded instantly under plasma bombardment. Entire squadrons vanished in seconds. Burning wreckage spun across the battlefield while pilots screamed over open comms. But the humans kept advancing. Closer, closer, directly toward the supercarrier. Inside the Voidfang, Zalter watched the attack with disbelief. They know this is suicide. An officer beside him nodded slowly. Yes, Commander. Zalter stared at the charging human pilots. Then realization slowly spread across his face. They don't care. No, they cared deeply. That was exactly why they kept coming. Suddenly, alarms exploded across the World Eater. Shield Generator 4 destroyed. Human fighters breached outer defenses. Multiple impacts detected. Zalter's eyes widened. The humans were actually getting through. And at the front of the attack formation, Lena Cross accelerated directly toward the heart of the supercarrier. Knowing she might be flying toward her own death, Commander Lena Cross flew straight into hell. The battlefield around the World Eater had become a storm of fire, debris, and death. Human fighters exploded every few seconds beneath overwhelming Dominion firepower. Burning wreckage bounced across the supercarrier's shields, while emergency alarms echoed through every communication channel. But the humans kept attacking. Again, and again, and again. Lena's hands tightened around the controls as her fighter rolled sideways to avoid incoming plasma fire. Blue energy streaked past her cockpit so close it shook the entire ship violently. "Cross brake left," a pilot shouted. Too late. An explosion slammed into the fighter's rear wing. Warning lights instantly flooded the cockpit while smoke burst from damaged systems. Thruster failure detected. Stabilizers offline. Lena fought the controls hard as the ship spun wildly through space. Around her, dozens of human fighters continued charging toward the giant Dominion supercarrier like arrows fired at a mountain. One by one, they vanished. But each sacrifice weakened the World Eater's defenses. Inside the supercarrier, Dominion officers shouted in panic. Shield Generator 6 destroyed. How are they getting through? They're targeting the weak points. Commander Zalter watched the tactical display in growing disbelief. Human fighters were deliberately sacrificing themselves to open gaps for others behind them. It made no logical sense. They knew the odds. They knew they would die. Yet none turned back. Zalter stared at the incoming human pilots. They fight like people already dead. An older Dominion officer answered quietly. No, they fight like people protecting home. The statement disturbed him more than he wanted to admit. Outside, Lena's damaged fighter finally stabilized. Her breathing sounded heavy inside the cockpit. Blood ran down the side of her face from a head injury. Several control panels sparked violently beside her while warning sirens screamed nonstop. Then her comm system crackled. "Commander Cross." It was Admiral Sophia Reyes. Lena swallowed hard, still flying. For now. Another explosion shook her fighter. Rey's voice softened slightly. "We've identified a weakness near the supercarrier's reactor core." Lena already knew what that meant. A direct strike. Close range. Almost impossible to survive. Silence filled the comm channel for one painful second. Then Reyes spoke again. "You are not ordered to do this." Lena looked out across the battlefield. Human ships burned everywhere. Dominion plasma fire lit the darkness like lightning storms. And far behind the battle lines, hidden beyond the fleet, lay the human colonies filled with civilians waiting to see whether humanity survived the night. Children, families, entire worlds. If the World Eater fired its planet-killer weapon, millions would die instantly. Lena closed her eyes briefly. Then she smiled weakly. Somebody has to finish this. The comm channel went silent. Finally, Reyes answered quietly. "Good hunting, Commander." The transmission ended. Lena exhaled slowly and pushed the throttle forward. Her fighter accelerated toward the supercarrier's center trench, while Dominion turrets instantly locked onto her. "Target approaching reactor corridor." "Destroy that fighter." Plasma cannons opened fire from every direction. The stars vanished behind explosions. Lena dodged between burning debris and collapsing shield fragments while alarms screamed around her. One nearby human fighter exploded beside her cockpit, briefly blinding her in white light. A pilot's final words echoed over comms. "For Earth." Static followed. Then silence. Lena gritted her teeth harder. The reactor trench appeared ahead, a narrow opening directly into the heart of the World Eater. She accelerated. Inside the Dominion flagship, Zalter suddenly realized her target. No. His eyes widened. She's going for the core. Dominion defenses concentrated entirely on Lena's fighter. Hundreds of guns fired together. The left wing exploded instantly. Her cockpit shook violently. Critical damage detected. Reactor instability rising. Ejection system offline. Smoke filled the cabin. Lena coughed painfully while struggling to keep control. But the trench entrance grew closer. 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 Inside her pocket rested a small photograph of her younger brother smiling beside a lake back on Earth. He had died 2 years earlier during a Dominion orbital bombardment. Lena touched the picture gently. "You deserved better," she whispered. Then she looked forward again. The reactor core glowed ahead like a miniature sun. Dominion officers screamed desperately across open channels. "Stop her! Fire everything!" But fear had arrived too late. Lena pushed the damaged fighter beyond maximum power. The engines began tearing themselves apart. Warning sirens became one endless scream. Her hands steadied. Her breathing slowed. And for the first time since the battle started, she looked peaceful. "Tell Earth," she whispered softly. The fighter entered the reactor chamber. "We're still here." Then the stars disappeared beneath fire. For one heartbeat, the galaxy went silent. And then the World Eater exploded. The destruction of the World Eater shook the entire sector. For several seconds, nobody moved. The massive supercarrier split apart in complete silence before exploding outward like a dying star. Fire consumed entire sections of the battlefield, while burning debris rained across nearby Dominion ships. Shockwaves smashed through enemy formations. Destroyers spun out of control. Carriers lost power instantly. Thousands of Dominion soldiers died in seconds. And at the center of the explosion, nothing remained of Commander Lena Cross. Only light. Inside the human fleet, comm channels went quiet. Pilots stopped speaking. Officers froze at their stations. Even battle alarms suddenly felt distant. Admiral Sophia Reyes stared at the burning remains of the supercarrier without saying a word. One young communications officer removed his headset slowly. "She did it." Another whispered quietly, "My God." Then across every human channel, someone began clapping. One pilot, then another, then hundreds more. Not celebration. Respect. Because every human in the fleet understood exactly what Lena had sacrificed. The applause spread ship to ship until it echoed across the battlefield itself. A final salute for someone who would never return home. Meanwhile, inside the Dominion flagship Voidfang, fear spread like poison. Commander Zalter stood frozen before tactical displays filled with destruction. The impossible had happened. The World Eater, the pride of the Dominion fleet, was gone. Destroyed by one human fighter. An officer nearby trembled visibly. "Commander, our fleet morale is collapsing." Another interrupted in panic. "Multiple ships are retreating without orders." Zalter clenched his fists. Cowards. But deep inside, even he felt it now. Fear. Not fear of human weapons. Not fear of human numbers. Fear of human determination. The humans fought differently from every species the Dominion had conquered. Most civilizations protected themselves first. They surrendered when survival became impossible. Humans didn't. The more pain they suffered, the harder they fought. Every death became fuel. Every tragedy became rage. Zalter finally understood the horrifying truth. Humanity weaponized grief. Suddenly, emergency transmissions flooded the bridge. Dominion High Command was calling. The screen activated instantly, revealing several high-ranking Dominion leaders surrounded by dark holographic chambers. Their expressions were furious. "You lost the World Eater," one leader snarled. Zalter lowered his head slightly. The humans fought beyond prediction. Another leader slammed a claw against his throne. "Excuses. Their resistance is spreading," a third added coldly. "Other systems are beginning to rebel after witnessing this battle." That news hit Zalter harder than expected. Across the galaxy, conquered civilizations had watched humans stand against impossible odds. And win. Hope was spreading, and hope was dangerous. One Dominion leader leaned closer to the screen. "The humans must be broken completely." Zalter remained silent. Then came the order that chilled even him. "Prepare the Earth offensive." The bridge went quiet instantly. Several Dominion officers looked shocked. "Attack Earth." Even hardened commanders knew what that meant. Earth wasn't simply a planet. It was humanity's homeworld. Its heart, its history, its origin. Zalter finally spoke carefully. "A direct assault on Earth could unite all human fleets permanently." "It already has," the leader replied coldly. Another continued. "Humans draw strength from emotional attachment. Destroy the source of that attachment, and the species collapses." Zalter wasn't so sure anymore. Because after everything he had witnessed, attacking Earth sounded less like strategy, and more like waking a sleeping predator. But the order stood. "Gather every surviving fleet," the Dominion leader commanded. "We end humanity now." The transmission ended. Silence filled the bridge. Far outside the damaged flagship, the remaining Dominion ships slowly regrouped among drifting wreckage. Thousands of escape pods floated through space, while human rescue vessels continued saving wounded survivors from both sides. Even now, the humans still rescued enemy civilians. Zalter stared at the sight with growing confusion. How can they kill so fiercely and still show mercy? No one answered, because no one understood humanity anymore. Suddenly, another officer turned from the sensor station. "Commander, long-range scans detect unusual activity near Earth." "What kind of activity?" The officer swallowed nervously. "Massive power signatures beneath the planet's oceans." Zalter frowned. "Natural." "No, Commander." The officer's voice shook slightly. "It looks artificial." Far away across the stars, hidden beneath Earth's deepest oceans, ancient machines slowly awakened for the first time in centuries. Gigantic reactors hummed beneath the sea floor. Buried weapon systems unlocked themselves automatically. And deep below the Atlantic Ocean, a colossal structure larger than cities began rising slowly toward the surface. Humanity had one final secret, and the Dominion was flying directly toward it. Earth waited in silence. From orbit, the human homeworld looked peaceful. Blue oceans reflected sunlight beautifully, while clouds drifted slowly above continents filled with billions of lives. No massive defense fleets guarded the planet. No battle formations filled nearby space. No warning broadcasts echoed across communications channels. To the arriving Varkeshi Dominion fleet, Earth looked vulnerable. Commander Zalter stood aboard the flagship Voidfang, staring at the planet carefully. "It makes no sense," one Dominion officer muttered nervously. "Where are their defenses?" Another officer laughed quietly. Perhaps the humans finally learned fear. But Zalter didn't believe that. Not anymore. After witnessing the sacrifice of Captain Elias Ward. After watching Commander Lena Cross destroy the World Eater with her own life. He knew humans too well now. If Earth appeared undefended, it was probably a trap. "Maintain caution," he ordered. The Dominion fleet advanced slowly toward Earth orbit, Hundreds of warships spread across the darkness, while weapons powered online one by one. Planet-killer cannons rotated toward the surface. Missile arrays locked onto major population centers. One Dominion officer grinned coldly. One order and their species ends. Then every sensor aboard the fleet suddenly failed. Alarms exploded across the bridge. "Commander, we just lost orbital scans. Massive electromagnetic interference detected." The lights flickered violently. Zalter stepped forward sharply. "Zorth." Nobody answered, because Earth itself had begun changing. At first, the oceans simply moved strangely. Then the Atlantic split apart. Water rose into giant waves as something enormous emerged from beneath the sea. Metal structures larger than mountains slowly rose above the surface covered in ancient human markings. One structure, then another, then dozens more. Entire oceans opened. Gigantic defense platforms hidden beneath Earth for centuries awakened together. Massive cannons unfolded toward the stars, while shield generators ignited around the planet like glowing blue fire. The Dominion bridge fell silent. An officer whispered in horror, "These weapons," another finished weakly, "are older than our empire." Across the Pacific Ocean, colossal railgun towers rose from underwater cities. Near Antarctica, hidden launch silos opened across entire mountain ranges. Even Earth's moon began transforming. Huge sections of lunar rock cracked apart, revealing buried weapon systems hidden deep beneath the surface. Zalter felt cold dread tighten inside his chest. Humanity had been preparing for this day for generations. Suddenly, a transmission forced itself across every Dominion screen. An elderly human woman appeared calmly inside a massive underground command center. Gray hair rested neatly across military shoulders decorated with old Earth insignias. Behind her stood rows of silent human officers. She looked more like a grandmother than a military commander. And somehow that terrified Zalter even more. "I am Director Amara Vale," she said softly. No fear touched her voice. No panic. Only absolute certainty. "You came to Earth believing humanity survived because of luck." The giant defense platforms around Earth continued powering up. Blue energy spread across orbit like storms made of light. "You were wronged." Zalter narrowed his eyes. "You hide behind weapons built in secret." Amara Vale looked directly into the camera. "No." Her expression hardened slightly. "We prepared." Images suddenly appeared beside her. Old human wars. Burning cities. Nuclear explosions. Mass graves. Human history itself. "For thousands of years," she continued, "humanity survived monsters." The images shifted. Ancient invasions. Civil wars. Extinction-level disasters. Every generation learned the same lesson. Massive orbital cannons rotated toward the Dominion fleet. Peace only survives when defended by people willing to protect it. One Dominion officer suddenly shouted in panic, "Planetary weapons locking onto us." Another screamed, energy levels exceeding maximum projections. Zalter roared instantly, "Open fire." The Dominion fleet unleashed everything at once. Thousands of plasma cannons lit the darkness. Missiles streaked toward Earth while planet-killer beams fired directly at the surface. Then Earth answered. The oceans exploded upward as giant railguns fired from beneath the sea. Moon-based cannons released beams of pure white energy that tore through Dominion ships instantly. Entire enemy cruisers vanished. Not damaged. Not crippled. Erased. Shockwaves spread through the fleet as ancient human weapons devastated ship after ship. Dominion formations collapsed within seconds beneath overwhelming firepower. One officer stared at tactical screens in complete disbelief. "We're being annihilated." Zalter watched burning wreckage fill orbit around Earth. For the first time in his life, the Great Dominion was losing. And deep inside the human command center beneath Earth, Director Amara Vale gave one final order quietly. "Wake the final system." Far below the planet's surface, something ancient opened its eyes. Earth's final system awakened without sound. Deep beneath oceans, mountains, and continents, something ancient and absolute came online. Systems humanity had never intended to use unless extinction was certain. The entire planet felt it, a low, steady vibration rising from the core of the world. In orbit, the Varkeshi Dominion fleet tried to retreat. But it was already too late. Commander Zalter stood frozen on the shattered bridge of the Voidfang. Around him, half the ship was gone. Consoles burned. Officers screamed into static. Entire sections of the fleet outside were disappearing under Earth's defensive fire. He wasn't commanding anymore. He was surviving. "Status report," he barked. A trembling officer answered. "We've lost 70% of the fleet, and Earth's weapons are still increasing output." On the tactical display, Earth was no longer a planet. It was a fortress. A weaponized world. A voice suddenly echoed across all Dominion channels. "Calm. Controlled. Unshakable. Director Amara Vale. You came to Earth to end humanity," she said quietly. Behind her, massive underground reactors pulsed like hearts waking from a long sleep. "Now you will learn why we survived everything before you." Zalter gritted his teeth. "Fire the planet-killer cores, crack the crust if you must." But the Dominion's superweapons never responded. They were already dead. Earth's counterfire had reached them first. Entire Dominion battleships were being erased mid-flight, disintegrated by beams originating from hidden orbital platforms and lunar cannons that fired with surgical precision. One carrier tried to jump to hyperspace. It vanished halfway through activation. Another attempted retreat. It split apart like glass under pressure. Panic spread across the Dominion fleet faster than destruction. "They're not just defending," one officer screamed. "They're hunting us." And it was true. Earth systems were not random. They prioritized targets. Command ships first. Communication hubs second. Escape routes last. It was controlled extermination of an invasion force. Zalter finally realized the horrifying truth. Humanity had studied war for millennia. Not to start it. To end it completely. Suddenly, the Voidfang shook violently again. Another explosion tore through the lower decks. "Engine core breach," someone shouted. The flagship was dying. And still Earth spoke. Amara Vale's voice returned, softer now, but heavier. "We do not want expansion." Images appeared behind her again. Human children. Burned colonies. Graves in space. "We do not want conquest." Now images of Dominion atrocities filled the screen. "We want only one thing." Her eyes hardened. "That no one ever comes to our home again." Zalter's claws tightened around the command rail. "You cannot destroy an empire," he hissed. "We are endless." Amara Vale stared at him for a long moment. Then she said, "Empires always say that, right before they end." A final signal activated across Earth systems. Every hidden weapon on the planet locked onto remaining Dominion vessels simultaneously. Moon cannons, ocean platforms, underground rail arrays, orbital defense rings, ancient human systems never meant to be revealed. All aligned, all charging. Zalter's eyes widened slowly. "This is everything." "Yes," Amara replied. A pause. "This is humanity, refusing to lose again." For the first time, Zalter looked away from the screen. Not from fear of death, but from understanding. He finally saw humanity clearly. They weren't expanding. They weren't conquering. They were remembering every time they had been powerless and refusing to be again. The final charge reached maximum. Earth went silent. Then, every weapon fired at once. The light filled space. No explosion followed. No sound. Just absence. When the glow faded, the Dominion fleet was gone. Not scattered, not fleeing, gone. Across the battlefield, silence returned to orbit. Only drifting debris remained where an empire once stood. Inside the broken void fang, Zalter knelt amid wreckage, alone now, staring at the ruined stars. His voice came out barely above a whisper. What are they? A damaged human transmission flickered one last time. Captain Elias Ward, recorded before his death, appeared briefly on screen. Calm, steady, human. We are what remains, he said softly. A pause. And what remembers? The message ended. Earth's defenses powered down slowly. The oceans settled. The weapons returned beneath the surface. The moon became still again. From space, Earth looked peaceful once more. But everything in the galaxy now knew the truth. It wasn't a vulnerable world. It was a warning. And humanity was not a species to be tested twice.